Welcome to the Daily Dharma, a gentle podcast where we read a philosophical story every week and reflect on how it relates to everyday life. Our focus is to use Buddhist philosophy to understand the complexity of modern life and find achievable and accessible pathways to peace. Hi everyone, welcome to the Daily Dharma. In this episode, we'll be talking about resting the spirit and why rest is a very important part of spiritual development and learning. The story that we'll be reflecting on this theme is called The Dirty Glasses, and it is an original Zen fable. Here is how the story goes. There was once a girl who had a special pair of glasses. When she was bright and full of energy, the lenses would be clear and without smudges. But the more tired and stressed she was, the more clouded the glasses became. One day, she was so exhausted that she could not see anything through her glasses. Due to her poor eyesight, she couldn't tell who was who and could barely work with her hands. As a result, she became deeply dejected at life due to her inability to accomplish anything. She also became isolated because she was very irritated and angry at everyone she encountered due to her bad eyesight. It was only when she began to rest that the glasses began to clear. The more she patiently rested, giving her mind and body time to heal, the more her glasses cleared up. Finally, her vision was fully restored, and she can see clearly in her life once more. This story is very much about how fatigue and a lack of rest for our mind, for our body, for our spirit can greatly impact and impair the way we see our lives. And of course, I'm very much talking from my recent experience with jet lag, which has impacted me so much more than it normally does. When you're tired, it absolutely alters your ability to take in information through your senses and to really process that information in a way that is useful and productive and kind. And as a result, it becomes very easy to become irritated and upset at life because you simply don't have the energy to cognitively process things the way we usually do. And thus, spiritual reflection and development and learning becomes incredibly difficult when we are not well rested. When I really think about it, there is a big reason why physical, mental, and otherwise rest in general is a really big part of every spiritual journey. And that's because if you're hungry, how can you listen? If you're tired, how can you read? If you're so sleepy from just the sheer exhaustion at life and you really need to just rest, how can you possibly sit and meditate? These are simply the facts of how our body works. But I do feel that in a way, because of the emphasis that we have in society to constantly be productive, to never be tired, and also this trend of trying to be on whenever our phones are on, whenever our computer's on. We almost never seem to have the right permission or the opportunity to really rest, especially when it comes to permission given to us by society and even sometimes our loving friends and family. In a way, rest is very rebellious because we have to shut off the FOMO, the fear of missing out on other things, and really prioritize our own rejuvenation and our own rest. And for me recently, this whole conversation and thought process about rest really occurred not because I had somehow realized it ahead of time, but really out of sheer necessity. Because I kept asking myself, why am I not back to my normal energy level? Why have I not recovered? What happened to that really productive and focused self that I had before I left for my trip? And I realized eventually that to ask myself to just recover on my own timeline doesn't really make sense. The body and the mind need patience from us in order to fully rest. And it really isn't also completely up to us to dictate how long it takes or how that rest really happens. And thus, I have to be open-minded about this process and be okay with feeling this sense of disconnect and sometimes a little bit of frustration that I'm not back to my normal self. But in struggling with that and being unhappy with myself, I'm definitely wasting more energy and time and bandwidth rather than simply accepting that I'm tired and I just need more time to sleep, to disconnect, to rest. And I have to trust that my mind and body and spirit know what they're doing, and that eventually I'll get back to that feeling of being more balanced and healthy. And I think that faith in the process and in knowing that rest is a little bit of a black box. We don't exactly know sometimes what rest is accomplishing. It could be deep in our unconscious. It could be healing things or wounds we didn't even know were there. But in just allowing ourselves, giving ourselves that full, free, open permission to take the nap that we really need, or even just to disconnect from social activities so we can just stay home and journal and reflect. Whatever the rest that we really need, and when we allow ourselves to take it, it does something underneath the surface that does actually bring a deeper sense of connection and energy and fulfillment that was missing before. And I think for myself, I also realized that in struggling so much, I simply forgot the very important step of being accepting of myself as I am. If I'm tired, if I am just in a place where I'm not fully myself again, that's okay. I have to accept that. And in accepting it or working to do so, I feel a lot more peaceful. I remembered again, how much we change so much in our lives, that as we age and as we move through the stages of our lives, our mind, our body, our spirit change in ways that sometimes we can't predict and sometimes we don't even understand. But that is how things are. That is how life works. And part of the spiritual journey is being aware of that and being kind to ourselves when that happens, instead of fighting against the change, and especially against the fatigue that comes when we need more rest than we usually do. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode, and I hope that you have a beautiful, safe, and joyful week ahead of you. If you have any questions or thoughts you'd like to share, please email me anytime at dailydharmapodcast@gmail.com. Until next week,